know that you're afraid.
According to the Bible, every single person on the earth was born into the middle of a war. This war is one that cannot typically be seen with the naked eye. Its existence is not broadcast on the evening news. Its reality is not even realized by the vast majority of the population. Yet this war has raged on since the very beginning. The first shot fired in this war had a devastating effect, when the serpent entered the garden and tempted the first man and woman to disobey God, falling into sin, and then death entered the world. Sometime after, as mankind began to multiply and cover the face of the earth, the first full assault on humanity was launched. In a way, you could describe it as an alien invasion. But these invaders did not come from some distant galaxy, from some far-off star system. Rather, they descended from right above, as together they conspired to abandon their assigned posts in the firmament, where the ether carried the light of their luminescence to the four corners of the earth. These watcher angels fell from their first estates that God had set for them, and they came down to terra firma, where they began a sort of colonization campaign. They sired the Nephilim, their hybrid abomination offspring, which began to ravage the land and feed upon men. They corrupted the genetics of not just humanity, but of animals and plants as well. Using the knowledge they had been given by God to perform their original tasks in the heavens, they proceeded to teach mankind all sorts of forbidden things in order to civilize them, to equip them in the building of cities, vast kingdoms, where these fallen angelic beings could rule as gods. The knowledge bestowed by these beings was presented as being the keys to humanity's path to enlightenment, the technological know-how that would eventually allow us to take our seats alongside them as gods. But of course, this was all a lie. This forbidden knowledge brought nothing but destruction, perversion, wickedness, and death. God, the Creator, finally became so grieved by the immensity of the wickedness on the earth and the corruption of His creation that He decided to wipe it all out and begin again, sparing one single family and the animals which God brought to ride out the waters with them. When the waters receded, the world had been cleansed from the evil that had almost wiped out humanity from the face of the earth. The great empires of the Watchers had been erased, their monuments and citadels shattered by earthquakes and buried by oceans. The angels who had conspired together against God were buried deep in the bowels of the earth, held there in the deepest darkness until the time of the final judgment of all things. The bodiless spirits of the giants, the Nephilim, were cursed to roam the earth, tortured by hunger and thirst that they could never satisfy, forever longing to have bodies to inhabit once again. Satan's direct rule over the whole earth through his vassals, the fallen Watchers, was over. But no sooner than the earth began to be filled once again with trees and plants and animals, and people began to spread out and fill it once again, did the enemy of mankind begin working, seeking to rebuild what God had destroyed, his beloved Atlantean Empire, whose sole purpose was the enslavement and destruction of mankind. But it would be different this time around. No longer did the Fallen One have the ability to send his rebellious emissaries to the earth, to take wives and build cities and palaces where such self-declared deities could sit and rule directly over their subjects. No longer could they walk amongst men and be revered for their brilliance and stature. The satanic kingdoms that would be built after the flood had to be done through the worship of now invisible deities, forced to orchestrate their rule through various systems of interdimensional communication. Since God had now bound them behind a spiritual veil, once again a spectrum of forbidden knowledge was disseminated amongst these newly reborn civilizations, in order to facilitate the connection between these civilizations and their demonic benefactors. Thus, in the courts of all the human kings and leaders of these kingdoms, worked a host of occult priesthoods, sorcerers, mediums, astrologers, and practitioners of divination. The subjects of these pagan kingdoms would demonstrate their fealty to their false, fallen, invisible gods by sacrificing to idols, building them temples, having orgies and revelries and bacchanalia. The rebellion against God resumed in earnest after the flood, from the first failed attempt by Nimrod to build a tower into the heavens and storm the throne of God.
After the flood, when Noah and his family started resettling the earth, the spirits of the Nephilim began attacking his family, tormenting many of them, leading many astray, and even provoking violence among Noah's family. And in the third week of this Jubilee, the unclean demons began to lead astray the children of the sons of Noah, and to make to earth and destroy them. And the sons of Noah came to Noah, their father, and told him concerning the demons which were leading astray, and blinding and slaying his son's sons. The evil spirits that arose from the bodies of the dead Nephilins created a demonic matrix that has engulfed our reality. They are almost everywhere, and ready to pounce on anyone who they sense as enemy. The Apostle Peter warns us about this in one of his letters. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, is a roaring lion, walking about, seeking whom he may devour. Collectively, demons' main functions are to deceive mankind, spread false doctrines, inspire revolt against the one true God, provoke corruption, war, and other violent acts, and torment and perhaps kill people through addictions, disease, physical and mental abuse, and psychological disorders. Many theorize that the best description for the physical nature of these demons is that they are interdimensional. They can reveal themselves at will in our own conventional reality, yet they exist at a higher reality than what we can observe with our own natural senses. In the study of demonology, it is observed that demons gain a foothold over a given area or within an individual, and they are given legal rights to enter the area or the person due to the practice of occult rituals, the occurrence of violent and traumatic events, and the breaking of God's divine law. This principle can also be applied to nations, organizations, institutions, and religious systems. In other words, forbidden acts by people create portals in which evil entities can enter. Therefore, the destiny of nations can be wrought with disorder and despair. Institutions and organizations can become operations of evil and corruption. Houses and buildings can become haunted. Individuals can become possessed or tormented, all because evil entities were given the legal rights of entry. The practice of the cult is one of the biggest reasons that evil entities are allowed to work with their mischief in people's lives. That is why its practice was strictly forbidden by God in His Torah. He hated its practice, not only because it was idolatry, but it also had some real dark power. It opened the door to the demonic, and it was extremely dangerous for people. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes a son or daughter pass through the fire, or who uses divination, or is an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a sorcerer, or a charmer, or one who has a familiar spirit, or a wizard, or a necromancer. According to the Book of Enoch, during the pre-flood world, the fallen angels taught humans the occult. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Armaros taught how to resolve enchantments. Barakel taught astrology. Kokobel taught the knowledge of astrology. Astrodel taught the courses of the moon. The Church Father expounds on the theory that the fallen angels were responsible for revealing the forbidden secrets of the occult to humans. Further explains that one of Noah's sons, named Ham, discovered this secret, passed it to his son. As a result, the lineage of Ham as a whole was responsible for bringing the religion of the fallen angels into the post-flood world. Fallen angels taught men the use of magical incantations that would force demons to obey them. After the flood, Ham, the son of Noah, unhappily discovered this and taught it to his sons. This became ingrained into the Egyptians, Persians, and the Babylonians. Nimrod was handed this knowledge, and by it caused men to go away from the worship of God and go into diverse and erratic superstitions, and they began to be governed by the signs in the stars and the motions of the planets. The Book of Jubilees records that Ham's son Canaan discovered occult writings carved on a rock that revealed the secrets of the fallen angels. He then passed on the secrets to his descendants, who became known as the Canaanites, who settled in the area that later became known as the land of Israel. The Canaanites collectively became notorious practitioners of the occult. Canaan grew, and his father taught him writing, and he went to seek for himself a place where he might seize for himself a city. And he found a writing which former generations had carved on the rock, and he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it, and sinned owing to it, for it contained the teaching of the watchers, in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun, and moon, and stars, all the signs of heaven. And he wrote it down, and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Noah about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. Cush, who was one of Ham's sons, had a son named Nimrod, and together they invaded ancient Mesopotamia and established the early Babylonian Empire. They instituted the worship of the fallen angels as the empire's national religion. Some historians say Cush was really the one responsible for the monumental project of building the Tower of Babel. Cush, Nimrod, and the citizens of ancient Babylon decided to reject God as their ruler and instead wanted to resurrect the pre-flood world along with its religious system. Canaan's descendants, the Canaanites, inherited the religious system of Babylon, but they also continued the pre-flood pagan system of ancestor worship. In the system of Canaanite ancestor worship, the founder of a city-state would become a god, and he would be known as Baal, meaning Lord. The wife of the founder would become the goddess. She would become the Asherah, meaning princess. Some of the Canaanites worshipped an idol named Molech with human sacrifices. People would hand over their firstborn to the priests, who would burn the child alive as a burnt offering to this god. This type of human sacrifice was called passing your children into the fire. Jeremiah, the prophet of Judah, describes this practice. And they have built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire. The rabbinical Jewish sage Rashi also comments on this abominable practice by the Canaanites. Tophet is Moloch, an idol which was made of brass. The Canaanites heated him from his lower parts, and his outstretched hands were made hot. They put the child in his hands, and it was burned alive. When the child vehemently cried out, the priests beat a drum, so the father would not hear the voice of his son and move his heart. The Tophet fire pits were located in the valley of Hinnom, near the southern base of Mount Moriah, located in Jerusalem. It is not the idols themselves that have the power to enslave the people spiritually. It is the evil entities behind the idol. The Apostle Paul clearly talks about how in every idol there are demons behind it to give it its power. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I would not that you should have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils. Some say that the god and goddess system of the Canaanites originate from Nimrod's wife/mother, Semiramis, who developed the system shortly after Nimrod was killed by Noah's son Shem. Fearing the downfall of the Babylonian Empire after the death of Nimrod, tradition says Semiramis, who became pregnant, claimed an unborn son, was the resurrected Nimrod. Some say he had lauded her son as the prophesied Messiah, predicted in Genesis 3:15. Thus began the Mystery Babylon fertility cults that spread across the world throughout the centuries and formed the basis of many of the false religious systems. For instance, the Egyptian trinity of Osiris, Isis, and Horus is the ancient Egyptian virgin, and Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz occult trinity. The Catholic mother-son idol system is nothing more than the Roman Catholic version of the Egyptian version and the Babylonian original. Many symbols of the so-called Illuminati occult fraternities come from the Mystery Babylon fertility occult system. It certainly reveals that those who control the government and the economies of this world are in turn being controlled by Satan and his fallen angels. In occult Freemasonry, esoteric symbols are said to have multiple meanings and interpretations. One likely interpretation of the fertility occult symbols they use is that the male principle, who is Nimrod, represents the heavenly beings or the fallen angels, and the female principle represents humanity or the human woman. Mating between these two principles produces an unholy hybrid offspring, which represents the abominable act that occurred during the pre-flood world. It is clear, from the symbolism that the Illuminati fraternities openly use, that their plans are to resurrect the pre-flood world. They are continuing the plans that Cush and Nimrod had when they ordered the construction of that monument of revolt against God's authority, the Tower of Babel.
How else could they have done it? Then science came along and taught us that we are not the measure of all things.